Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to my channel, Philosmos. My name is Money, and yet I've got another interesting topic for you today. So today, let's get straight into it. I've spoken about this before briefly. In fact, I mentioned this concept a lot in my book, Blind Spots of Consciousness. This is pure consciousness. But before I get into what pure consciousness is, let's address what the polarized consciousnesses. So, from this angle, we have two types of forms of consciousness. We have the polarized consciousness, and then we have the pure consciousness. So let me briefly just explain what the polarized consciousness is. So the polarized consciousness sees things in two parts. Okay, so two parts like this. There's a self and there's a world. Okay, so there's me and then there's you. There's a self and there's an external world. So the polarized consciousness always has the feel that is carrying around a self, that this self is actually encountering the world, and the self has things that are beneficial for it and things that are detrimental for it. Okay, so this self has opinions, expectations, because it has this fundamental belief that it is separate from the external world, that the internal world is distinct from the external world. Thus, based on this kind of premise, is the reason as to why we have experienced the level of suffering that we have as a species, because this is an incorrect premise. So to just understand why we've been carrying this polarized consciousness was we can actually blame evolution for this, not necessarily blame, but I could use a better choice of word there, but let's just work with the word blame. Our mental abilities, the mental capacities that we had to evolve because we had to continuously mold and manipulate the environment to better suit us. So we came from this perspective in the sense that now we're encountering a world that is not necessarily in harmony with the human organism. The human organism always has to find a way to alter situations and events and the environment in general in order to better suit us so that we can survive. So it may have stemmed further back from that situation, but this is like the main reason as to why there is a self, because the organism feels as if it needs to be protected. So through this need of protection, through this need of surviving, a conceptual self is created in which you assume that you are this self, this conceptual self that has been created through bundles of perceptions and beliefs in which you've drawn from the society at large. And then this self believes that it needs to survive. But in actuality, when you actually investigate this, the self does not exist. It's a concept existing in the mind, and it's in constant flux. It's always changing. But what never changes is pure consciousness. So the consciousness in me, and the consciousness in you, there is no difference. The only difference is the content to which occupies my consciousness and your consciousness. Your consciousness is flustered by your emotions, the sensations in your body, the sensory world, the sensory experiences, your thoughts, memories, future expectations. You see, those wedge the differences between me and you based on the content to which your consciousness is aware of. But the consciousness itself is the same. The consciousness in me is the same consciousness in you, and the same consciousness in the dog, and the same consciousness in the mosquito. It is just this luminant presence, this presence that has no label, that has no readily attached association to it. It's just an observer, a conscious observer that witnesses existence and everything that occurs within existence. And it is the one that experiences sound, it is the one that experiences sight, but it itself is not experiencing that. It is that phenomena, because that phenomena is birthed out from consciousness. Consciousness is not derived from matter. Matter, in actuality, is derived from consciousness. For without consciousness, there is no matter, there is no experience. So the world relies, the universe relies, the bread and butter, the very heartbeat of the universe is pure consciousness. So you're probably asking yourself, what is the relevance to this? Or how can this help me in my life? How can this help me transform my life? So basically, I just want you to understand the potency of pure consciousness. So whenever you find yourself feeling stuck, or feeling as if you're in an impossible situation, you're experiencing an internal feeling or a circumstance, or your mind is just going wild, pure consciousness is the great neutralizer. Okay, so what consciousness does, pure consciousness, is that it comes from the state of purity. It is not coming with assumptions, it's not coming with premises, it's just coming as pure consciousness, just witnessing that event, witnessing that mental state, witnessing that emotional state, witnessing any kind of situation that can actually transpire in your life from an objective point of view. It is not coming from a self that says this is good for me or this is bad for me, because that is a premise of the polarized consciousness. There's things that are beneficial for you and things that are detrimental for you. But in the realm, the domain of pure consciousness, there is no good and there is no bad. Okay, and this is a concept that probably the average human being will find difficulty understanding, because pure consciousness goes beyond the world of relativity. And from this higher perspective, you're able to see things as they truly are. Because polarized consciousness is too close to the situation, it's too close to the physical body, it's too close to the mind, because it's involved. It's involved. Pure consciousness is always detached, and detached may be a negative connotation, may have negative connotations attached to it. It kind of implies that there's some level of coldness, you're a bit withdrawn, but that is not really the case. Pure consciousness stands as an absolute, as a singular, and every event, every circumstance, your body, your mind, everything is derived from that singular position of absolute pure consciousness. So the pure consciousness itself, the state itself, is an equilibrium, it's peace, it is happiness. Okay, so another thing is, let me just place it down here. So what pure consciousness does is that it creates an equilibrium in your experience. It neutralizes the effects that your mind has on your body. It neutralizes the effects of the circumstances in your life. It basically creates an equilibrium in your life to which you're able to look at things from a pure perspective, a perspective that is not tainted by ideas and beliefs, but unscathed. It's basically unscathed. You see things as they truly are. For in pure consciousness, this is the roots, this is the fabric of the universe. And thus, when you take yourself to that level of consciousness, then you realize that life takes care of you. You don't necessarily need to worry about your organism, you don't need to worry about your heart beating, you don't need to worry about the chemicals that your brain is secreting. Why? Because this is actually all taken care by pure consciousness. And pure consciousness is not a new term. In fact, in a lot of mystical traditions, it is mentioned as a state of I am. Okay, so I am is a state of presence, it's a state of being where there is no self per se, because a self implies that there's an accumulation of experiences, there's an accumulation of beliefs, ideas, concepts, but in the state of I am, it's just very singular. in this singular experience of consciousness in which it is not attached to anything at all. It's not attached to a name, it's not attached to a body, it's not attached to a mind, it's not attached to a circumstance, it's not attached to feelings, it is attached to nothing. It is just in pure observation of existence. And this is a place of power. If you approach everything in your life from pure consciousness, you realize just how synchronistic life can be, how things can happen. What actually happens is, because most of us are occupying the state of consciousness in which we are polarized, we think we need to go we need to resist the physical world, and we need to fight it, and we need to impose our will. This is not really the case. In pure consciousness, desires are born, desires are experienced, but there's no attachment to it. And because there's no attachment, the desires are able to maneuver around the networks of the universe and ensure that that desire actually transpires if you truly need it. But in polarized consciousness, we restrict things from actually happening for us, because we think we need to take care of it ourselves. We think we need to will things to happen. But in the state of pure consciousness, which is a universal consciousness, we see things from a higher perspective, in which we don't necessarily have to do things. Okay, and that contradicts the main premise of the human mind, in which things need to be propelled, things need to be executed, things need to be initiated. That is true. But once it is done from pure consciousness, it is done from the sense of not negating anything else. It is done from purity. So all your actions are pure, all your thoughts are pure, all your emotions are pure. And when I say pure, I do not mean that it is purely good. I mean pure in the sense that there is no attachment, there is no label, no association attached to that thing. It is just pure observation of what is. And what is always in constant flux. Thus, if you enter the universe, if you enter your experience from pure consciousness, you'll realize just how malleable and changeable the world is. Okay, so I will definitely elaborate on this much more. I just want to be as reductive as possible to ensure that my videos aren't too long. So there are two ways to get into pure consciousness, and that is mindfulness and meditation. Okay, so these are the two practices that I do. Of course, there are many other practices in order to pry into pure consciousness, which is a state that is akin to nirvana and enlightenment. So what mindfulness does, what you do in mindfulness, is basically just observing your thoughts, observing the pictures, the images in your mind, with no attachment, with no insistence that you need to understand what is actually going on internally. Okay, and meditation, there are many ways to meditate. We can sit in a lotus position, close our eyes, and just focus on our breathing, or we can treat meditation as a day-to-day thing. We can actually participate in life, do everything that we normally do on a day-to-day basis in a meditative state, which means that you are purely aware of the sensory world, the sensory experiences. You're purely aware of your body, your mind, and this vital energy that is coursing through your organism. You're just aware, and you're not creating an internal dialogue of what is going on externally. You're just in observation, and you're just witnessing, and you're alert of everything. And from this point, from this kind of seeing, there is always peace, and there is always an underlying sensation of happiness, because you are back to where you originated from, which is pure consciousness. This is the origin, this is the source of perceiving, this is the source of the universe, and this is the source of existence. So I will elaborate on this much more, guys, but these are the two ways in which you can enter pure consciousness. And you will know when you're in pure consciousness. You will feel a sense of lightness, a sense of being able to see things as they are. You will see a tree, other people will see trees that are still stuck in the polarized consciousness. But the main difference is that another person will look at that tree and say, okay, I am here, this is me, and that is a tree, and we are separate. But from pure consciousness is we're looking at the tree and we're looking at ourselves and we're like, okay, this is all housed in consciousness. Thus, this distinction between me and the tree is merely an illusion. We are actually one and the same thing. Why? Because we are housed in the same domain of consciousness. So thank you very much, guys, for listening to this video. As I said twice, I will elaborate much more on this. So I would like to tell you again, please subscribe to my channel. And to end it off, as I always end it off, to those who seek, seek no more, for in the present we find it all. Thank you very much, guys.